Hey guys, GH. Okay, just got a bit of time. Just hang about. I never talk about Hogan because, you know, there's always so many theories bandied about what he did in his golf swing, and none of us know what he did. But the great old Australian player, there was a good Australian player back in the 50s and 60s, or 40s, 50s, a guy called Norman von Nyder. He spent a bit of time with Hogan, and they were very similar type personalities, you know, a little bit removed, and so they got on well. To the extent that Hogan said to von Nyder, he said, "Norman, if you stay here in America and play over here with us," he said, "you'll be the second highest money winner to me on the tour." And he said, Norman told me that. He said, Hogan said that to me. But Norman didn't like the American lifestyle. He was very much into the race horses and all sorts of stuff in Australia, and he liked that sort of stuff. So he didn't really want to stay in America in those days. But Norman told me something very interesting. And we were talking about Hogan one day, and he said, "What do you think Hogan did?" I said, "Oh, look, he probably did a lot of things, but, you know, we'll never know." I said, "What do you think he did?" And he said, "Well, I think the way he turned in his golf swing, his thought process was entirely different to anybody else's. In that he never ever wanted to turn to the right in the backswing. His whole thought process was to turn to the left in the backswing." And I didn't ask Norman, I didn't, and this was at Coralban Valley up here, when he was up here in Queensland for a while. And I said, and we were just sitting down having a drink outside, and I just got up and I said, "Well, it's interesting," I said, "because I've always seen something in Hogan's swing that basically makes sense of what you're saying. In that what I saw in Hogan's golf swing was that the moment he started, he was always moving this way. He was not intentionally moving that way ever. And this whole trail side, this right side, was trying to turn this way. It was trying to go back here. It was trying to keep turning this way. Everything was to turn this way. It wasn't turning that way. It was turning this way. Like he was going clockwise as his intention. Weight shift, rotation, everything. And if you look at Hogan, if you look at him from a back-on point of view, this is what we saw, didn't we? Watch this leg. We saw this. That's what we saw. Now, why do we see that? Because this is going that way. It's not going that way. It's going that way. It's not going that way. It's going that way. You can't get that look. You can't get that look unless the intention is to go this way. You just can't get that look. Nobody. I've seen people show that view behind and talk about it and even put lines on it, but they don't say how he got there. They just say he turned into his right hip. But what direction did he turn into his right hip? I can tell you he didn't turn that way. He didn't want to go that way. From the moment he started his backswing, this was going this way. He wanted to turn that way. He wanted to go this way. And then we started to talk about the swing, and I said, well, I saw that in his golf swing. I saw him wanting to take as much of his rotation and his mass and his coiling capability that way, and increase it on the downswing. But what he did in the downswing, I think, is that when he did turn here, and he went to there, this stayed here, and then this hip here, went away from it, like that. It went here, and it went away from it like that. And it was what I call spreading the pelvis. This was still pushing, but it wasn't coming forward in that initial stage. He was loaded left like this, and then this was going here. So this was actually getting away from here. This part of the hip, and this was going here. And then once he got here, then he got the drive going. But the reason that trail heel stayed in here was because this pelvis, this hip portion here stayed back. And it stayed back there even as he was coming through, even though he was driving that left hip around, this was still trying to stay back. He didn't want that. He drove with that foot, like he said, his runner's stance. But I believe that he held that back while this was pulling away from it. And that's how he got that strange, convoluted look about him. And if you actually use that dynamic in a golf swing, if you actually do this, if I actually turn that there, that's what I'll look like. Oh, here I am. And watch this front leg, that front leg pivot that Hogan got. Here. Look at that knee's here, huh? There it is. And then that this stayed here, and then that went here. He was going that way and he kept going that way. And that's why he got here, guys. He went here, and then he went here, and he kept going here, and that's why he got that look about him. Because this was dragging so hard, this whole left axis, this whole rotational left axis, that it pulled that lead hand into that strong impact position. But to do that, you had to be incredibly flexible in the hip extensors, the upper body, the shoulder girdle, everything. And he was a very, very flexible guy. Probably the most flexible next to Bubba Watson that's ever played the game. And he could do that. And that's why that swing looked so different. And that's why it looked as solid as it was, as braced as it was at the top of the swing, and why he had that incredible ability to stay in position. Because it really was a rotational process this way. There was no push of this side that way. It was a throw of this side that way. There. If he could have, I think he would have done that and kept going. I'm sure he would have done that. But that's what Norman von Nyder and I talked about relative to Hogan's swing. And Norman von Nyder used to hang on to the club. He was an amazing ball striker. In those old days, those old McGregor golf clubs, the tiny little blades, I mean, he would hit one irons off hard pan, and it would sound like a rifle shot. And they used those big old heavy golf shafts back in those days, probably 140 grams, 145 gram shafts, thick wall. So he used to have the McGregor propelled multi-steps in his irons, but they were very stiff. They were the same as Byron Nelson used, and Hogan used them. Hogan actually used that shaft, the McGregor Propel multi-step. But because Hogan had his tip like you wouldn't believe. So that's interesting, isn't it, guys? But we see that. How did Hogan have that look if he didn't do that? How did Hogan have this look about him if he didn't want to rotate everything that way? How did he have this look from behind? How did he have that look? You can't get it unless you're trying to push that around here, trying to push this hip around here. You can't get that look. How can you? You can't do it. And that's why most people don't look like Hogan. Now, I've never heard anyone talk about that. Anyway, guys, it's just It's just Hogan according to JH, and a little bit I got from the horse's mouth from Norman von Nyder. I mean, I can't swing like that. I wish I could. Because for me, if I actually do that, that creates huge tension and torque for me there, and I want to get back to the ball so quickly that halfway back I stop turning. Yeah, so guys, that's just interesting, isn't it? I never usually talk about Hogan and what he did, because we don't know what he did. But that's just a an opinion of myself, and a little bit of information from Norman von Nyder, because Norman said he used to turn the complete opposite way to what everybody else thinks they need to do in the golf swing. Hogan never wanted to go there. Hogan wanted to get everything going this way, and he looked like that. When you think about it, that's what he looked like. That's why he had that look about him with the right, and particularly from behind when you see him here. That's what he looked like, guys. Look. How do you get this look? How do you get that look? If you're not turning this that way, and then you go here. Here, and then we go. I'm going to have a session this week and see if I can actually just get myself loosened up a little bit and do that. Hit some shots like that. Anyway, guys, that's just Hogan according to JH. I did get that information from the horse's mouth from Norman von Nyder, who spent some time with him. And of course, Norman was a great, unbelievable ball striker in his day. I think he held the record at Sunningdale in England for like 25 years or 30 years. It was 65 at Sunningdale. Like Sunningdale was a tough course in those days, and he held the record there for 35 years or something against everybody. Okay, guys, that's just a little aside, but it's interesting. And really, if you think about it, you can't get that Hogan look unless you do that. You try getting that Hogan look without doing that. Can't get it. Okay, guys, just a little side.